In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos post-game reaction podcast brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. My name is Ben Grant, joined as always by JB as the Toronto Argonauts escape with a 2019 win over the Montreal Alouettes in their season opener. JB, wins a win, I guess?
Yeah, I think that's probably the correct phrase. I didn't think the Argos stole the game. I thought that they were deserving winners, and I felt if they had lost, they would have blown the game. So in the end, it was definitely a lucky break, but I think on the whole, they deserved the win.
The Argos should have won by 20 if you go back and look through all of the missed opportunities. The Argos defense played outstanding football for about 2.5 quarters, and then slowly Montreal started to get some momentum, and the Toronto offense just couldn't cash in, and that was what this was about tonight. 4 rouges. Now, we needed them because we won by one of those rouges, but you can't have 4 rouges in a game. That's just not, especially now, this year of all years, where a rouge brings the ball out to the 40 instead of the 35, where there's so many negative consequences to you throwing away those points. So they should have won easily, but really those last few plays, I didn't think there was any way that they were going to win. It was a chip shot field goal at the end that Montreal misses, down by 2 points at the time. It really feels like a stolen victory to me. Let's talk about some of the, I guess how the game went down. We'll talk about some of the players, some of the conversation points, and there's a lot of them that we want to get to. But before we get to that, a quick shout out to Chris Belenovich of the Toronto Argonauts, who had us in front row seats in the press box. JB, that was the best place in the world to watch a football game from.
It was delightful. Windows open. I could get the full sound of the crowd, and a pretty damn good football game for in parts.
And the only negative is that we weren't able to see any replays. So some of the stuff, some of our analysis, we may have to change some of our thoughts after we rewatch the game and take a look at some of those replays. But seeing it live, I just thought we could see the whole field extremely well. So yeah, I had a lot of got a lot out of tonight's game, I felt. So let's get through the game itself. It couldn't have opened much better. So first of all, Montreal takes the kickoff. Was there any part of you that was worried Chandler Worthy was going to take that opening kickoff?
100%. Because I wasn't really thinking about it until the ball actually was in the air, and then it occurred to me that they were kicking the Worthy, and this guy's probably going to run a touchdown down our throats to open the game. After that, it was fine. But yeah, while that ball was in the air on the opening kickoff, I definitely had visions of him breaking a touchdown. But luckily, he was still Chandler Worthy when he caught the ball.
Yeah, and it didn't come back to haunt us. But yeah, I had that same thought because it didn't occur to me either. And as the ball's in the air, I heard you say, "Is that Worthy back there?" And I took a look, and sure enough, it was Worthy. And we both had that same thought. But yeah, it was covered well. Defense forces just a beautiful 2-and-out. It just set the tone so nicely. And that's why I was so disappointed in what happened next to the offense. Because that defense, first of all, it's a beautiful run stuff. They crowded the line of scrimmage. Oakman gets in there, blows up a run play. And that was something that would sort of continue all night. And on the second play, Hendricks gets in there with a sack of Vernon Adams, and Montreal's punting the ball away. Toronto takes the ball all the way down the field, has a 1st and goal from the 10 situation, and everything goes wrong. First of all, the line allows a free blitzer through the middle. I don't know quite what happened there. I don't know who missed their assignment, but the ball had to be thrown away. And then on second down, McLeod Bethel-Thompson threw what looked like an interception intended for Cam Phillips. It was, fortunately for the Argos, was overruled. From our vantage point, it looked like a pick. But yeah, there's one angle you can see where the ball does hit the ground indeed. And so that got overturned. The Argos end up kicking a field goal. I asked McLeod Bethel-Thompson about that play after the game because it just looked weird to me. Right when he released the ball, it was sort of like, where are you throwing? Because there was a Montreal DB standing right there. And what happened on that play, he was really upset at himself. He says it's going to be one of those plays that he thinks about all night because he read the defense correctly, but not really the alignment. And he sort of criticized himself for not going, not looking at the coverage outside in. He found the safety. He sort of did all those first steps. He read man. And he's got a concept that I believe, again, not having seen replay, but I believe Phillips had a deep out. And I believe Curly Gittens Jr. had a spot route, just basically, stopping. And McLeod saw a man right away, and he saw Phillips beat his guy to the outside, and so he just threw it up into a space that he felt Phillips could easily get to. What he didn't account for is that the corner who was over top of Gittens Jr. was playing soft, which he acknowledges he knew all week he would, and that was something they prepared for. So he was way off, and it just ended up being an easy ball, in theory, to that corner. It was just standing there waiting for that pass to come down.
Yeah, it was terrible. He did not have a good game. He ended up with decent stats, but the eye test, it was not a good game for somebody who you would like to be the leader of the team. And this is an ongoing issue. I mean, I do like my ongoing issues, but he has to get more efficient in the red zone. He is dangerously close to being a 2020 quarterback who can move up and down the field but can't do anything when he gets down there. I mean, it's a problem. I don't know if it's in his head, but it's not great. So like that kind of play today, like what should have happened is a touchdown, dominating defense. We go on and we win by 15. So that was disappointing. I mean, he's far enough along in his career and his development that that blown pass. I mean, I'm glad that he feels bad, but I mean, we're kind of past that, aren't we? Really?
We are, but you're still learning from it, and he just wishes he had hit Curly Gittens Jr. right away, and he feels he would have gotten a touchdown, and he knew that basically when the ball left his hand. But yeah, it doesn't change anything, so it's frustrating. Now, what I thought McLeod Bethel Thompson did do well today is, and it's something he always does well, and I don't think he gets enough credit for this. He took a ton of hits tonight, and he stood in the pocket again and again, and I don't know how a human being can program themselves to do that. When you get like crushed, he got annihilated a bunch of times tonight, and yet on the very next passing play, he doesn't have happy feet. He's not rushing the throw. He's not cowering or scared back there. He still stands in there, takes another hit, and gets the ball out. And I asked him about, how you have that mentality. And he basically just said it's something he just had to accept. He's not a running quarterback. And so he's just going to have to learn to take hits in the pocket. But I just think that's an ability most people don't have.
Yeah. He showed the things that make him, likable and easy to cheer for. He's tough as nails. There's no doubt about that. He stands in the pocket. He does have drives, like the drive to start the second half, where he's dialed in and really looks like a leader. I guess it's what makes it so frustrating is when you have these other drives where it's just like his he just loses focus, or I'm not sure what happens, but he just makes these decisions where you're like, what is happening here? Why would he possibly make that throw? And so, a bunch of times tonight, he's got throws he needs to get rid of out of his arsenal, and the play callers need to, I think the play caller still doesn't I don't think there's a great or a, I won't say great. It's a decent relationship, but I don't think they totally get each other yet. I don't think the game is being called to maximize what he does. And I think that also needs to improve a little bit. I think there has to be a little better understanding about what he's going to do. I thought those inside slant stuff in the second half was way better. But I don't know. I'm not crazy about all those wide throws just because he's got the arm to do it. I felt he threw wide like 15 times in a row. That's no good.
It was also a weird set for him to work out of, and we're kind of getting off track of our little recap here, but that's fine. We can work our way through it this way. They ran so many tight end sets tonight. More tight end sets tonight in this game than they did all last season.
Without tight ends.
And that's the thing. They only dressed one fullback. I mean, fullback tight end is basically the same thing in the CFL. They don't really have true tight ends. But Declan Cross was the only guy they had dressed. Last year, every single game they just dressed 3, except for Week 10 against Ottawa, they dressed 4. And they'd never used them. They never got on the field in offense, so rarely. And tonight they kept going to it. They were doing double tight end sets with Isaiah Wright. And I asked Coach Dinwiddie about that plan, and he basically said it was a combination of things that they saw based on film of Calgary, Montreal last week, and what they had in Andrew Harris in the running game, that he wanted to be able to put tight ends in there. And he just simply didn't have healthy tight ends to be able to do that with. Carbone's banged up. He's a practice roster guy, and he felt like Isaiah Wright could fill that void and, did fairly well considering he's a receiver now playing tight end. But I wonder if McLeod Bethel Thompson feels fully comfortable. He hasn't played with double tight throwing passes. It's just not part of his game.
No, it's not easy. Like he's talented, but he's not a star. So like it's tough. I think it's a tough thing for them to figure out how to maximize him, because when you do maximize him, he is good enough to win a Grey Cup. But how you get to that point, they don't seem to have yet.
Let's talk about the defense a little bit, because the next few series, the defense, so they end up settling for a Boris Beatty field goal, 17-yard field goal. I hate 17-yard field goals. 3-0 Argos. The Argos force another punt. Toronto gets the ball back, and Bethel Thompson.
They also forced Montreal to punt on Vernon Adams as their starting quarterback.
Yes, that also happened. We'll get to that in a minute too. And Bethel Thompson throws an interception. It was a drag route that came really late, gets tipped off Daniel's hand, ends up getting picked off by Williams. Initially, I thought he returned it for a pick 6, but they ruled him down on the tightest of calls. But both of those replays going in favor of the Argos. It's got to be so frustrating for a defense, though, because they get back out there. Montreal's already in field goal range, and of course they kick a field goal, and it's 3-3 now, and the defense has played lights out football, and it's tied 3-3. It's got to be frustrating considering how well they were playing.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. There's no doubt that the defense felt worn down by the end of the game, and that's going to be a dynamic as well. Like you ideally want both sides of the ball to feel complementary, and not that one side is doing the majority of the work. So again, that goes to trying to get Macbeth back on schedule. Trying to get some drives going. Really try and be more efficient with the ball, so that you're not in a position where the defense is out there desperately trying to hold off Montreal with no gas left in the tank. Everybody knows that they should never have been in that position. That game should have been home and dry.
They were clear, like Toronto was clearly the better team, but they just couldn't. Yeah, they just couldn't find a way to capitalize. So that quarter basically ends with a Toronto rouge, and I want to set this up and ask you about this play. So the ball is at right at midfield. It's 3rd and 6. They bring in Haggerty to punt, John Haggerty to punt, not the safety. He punts a 62-yard ball that goes into the end zone, just goes into the end zone for a rouge. 3rd and 6 at the 54. Is punting the right move in that situation? A 3-3 game?
No, in a word. But look, they've got this new toy, and he's got a skill set that they like and that they think can be useful in the new league with the rules about the punting, and that he might be able to basically coffin kick punts and nail people down to the 1 or the 2. I don't object to that idea, especially the way the defense was playing. I think if we have Montreal pinned there, that's probably a very good chance that turns into a score. But I don't know. I guess they wanted to see if he could do it, but I just don't think that's the play. Even like it's just so unlikely that he's going to kick the ball out at the 1. It's just way more likely what happened, which is the ball goes into the end zone. So I'm not totally sold on having the position being given up to the punter, to be honest. Um, he's certainly gonna have to have a better percentage of balls bouncing out at the 5 than he did tonight.
Now, another way of looking at it is, well, we did see one go out at the 1 in preseason, and we've seen him in practice nail those coffin corners. Now, I know in a game it's different, and they could have either one of those rouges that he got on those long punts could have bounced out of bounds. I think he got a bit unlucky with both of those bounces. But let's talk about that roster spot a bit. But first of all, he's a global player, and so having him dressed, yes, you're taking up a roster spot, but you're in a way you're not, because you're not necessarily having to fill another position with a different global player. And so I do take issue with that a little bit in terms of taking up a roster spot. But if you just look at it as, well, yeah, Boris Bede was field goals and punting and kickoffs last year. That was just one spot. Wouldn't it be nice to have another O-lineman or linebacker or whatever it is, fullback? But it doesn't really work like that unless the guy you're bringing in is a global player. So I don't feel like they were missing a different global player today. So that's the reason that I would keep going with Haggerty and Bede doing separate jobs.
I mean, I think I can see that, right, the way the CFL is sort of unique and they don't have another global player worth playing, and I can understand that. But, I mean, the call to punt there is the wrong call unless he can do it. So he's going to have to be able to do it. And is that an unfair request? Maybe, but this is professional football. If he can't have the ball go out consistently around the 5, I just think then you should not be punting the ball at the 50. I think you just let him be a normal punter. So, I think that's the pressure on them, I think, and on the special teams coach is that's going to have to become a lot more reliable, or they're going to have to change their philosophy to a more aggressive one and not do that, which, basically they gave up a down for 10 yards of field position. I mean, it's a shockingly bad play when it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's such a difference coming out to the 40. It's only 5 yards, but it does make a big difference.
You're basically just giving the ball and saying, you know what, we don't want another down.
Yeah, in exchange for a point. But
and
is
look,
it worth it?
I mean, and hey, man, I guess who am I to say? The rouges carried the day, so maybe that's the future.
I don't think that's the answer. Let's talk about the defense a little bit. Shane Ray was phenomenal tonight.
Like,
good.
He was best game he's played as an Argo by 1,000%.
Yeah, no question. He looked tonight the way Shane Ray looked like when he first arrived in camp last year. I remember my first few days of camp, and I thought he was unbelievable. I thought there was no one that was going to be able to block him, and then injuries caught up with him. I'm a little worried because it looked like he hurt his hand or his wrist tonight, and he's had forearm problems, wrist problems, hand problems. And it was the Montreal touchdown, the quarterback sneak that went for a touchdown. He came up from that play holding his wrist or his hand and looked highly irritated, as he would be having been through so many injuries to that area. So hopefully he's okay, because he was on fire tonight. Shot
out of a cannon. His backside pursuit. Honestly, he backside pursued like a will linebacker. I mean, he was all over the field. He looked great.
Yeah, but he was unstoppable tonight. And let's talk about that defense a little bit, because as the game progresses, the Argos add another rouge on a 53-yard punt. This one from the Montreal 48, which is usually a go for it position, but 3rd and 16, you're not going to go for it there. I don't wonder why they don't kick a field goal there. We know Boris Bede can hit a 55-yard field goal. Are they just worried that might get turned into a Chandler-worthy punt return touchdown if it misses?
I don't think so. I think they wanted to take their new car for a spin. They got the Aussie, and he's Mr. Kick It Out at the 2. and he does it at practice, and now they want to show everybody what their new toy does, and Price is Right music.
It could be. I guess it could be that, because it would have worked. Like, it would have been beautiful. The defense was playing so well that if they had pinned them inside the 5,
where they had him punt, a punt out at the 5 would have been fantastic. I'm sure the special teams coach died inside both times.
So from that, some bad things started to happen. So we already had a lot of guys playing out of position. You had Robert Priester, who was playing Sam Backer, which was a new spot for him, and he did remarkably well considering he did get beat a couple times. There's one where he just got beat on a double move near the end of the game, was able to recover to make the play. But I think all in all, for his first attempt at Sam Backer, I thought he played remarkably well.
Yeah, I thought I thought that it wasn't a noticeable weakness, and man, at linebacker, the improvement over Judge was pretty drastic.
Yeah, Wynton McManus was such a difference maker today, and I like Cam Judge, and I think he's probably.
I think Wynton McManus was probably the best player on the field. I mean, with due respect to Ray.
Yeah, no, he might have been. He was so solid back there, and Judge was so disappointing in Toronto last year because he got hurt and he just never looked the same. He had a bit of a rough game in Calgary last week too, so maybe he won't bounce back. I don't know, but. Man, Wynton McManus and Enoch Mwamba together are a deadly pair of linebackers, and they made up for a lot of the flaws that existed elsewhere on the defense. And the next one, we said coming into this game, there's 2 things that can't happen. And those were, you cannot have a tackle go down because the Argos already missing Cage. Isaiah Cage was out with a head injury. He wasn't cleared to play. And also missing Jamal Peters, and generally short in the defensive backfield. They could not lose a tackle. They could not lose a DB. That was the 2 musts coming into this. And don't the Argos go and lose both of those things in the first half? So let's talk first about the defensive loss. Robertson Daniel goes down with an injury, and we don't know the extent of it, but it didn't look good. Just the fact that he wasn't able to put any pressure on his leg as they got him off the field. That's never a good sign. And they were in a real mess at that point. So I thought they might bring in Matt Boateng to play corner. Instead, they brought in Caleb Holden initially to play boundary half, and they slid Shaq Richardson over to the corner spot. But then a few plays later, they flipped those guys. And Caleb Holden, he looked pretty lost out there because it's just a position he hasn't been practicing. And he really wasn't, I don't think, expected to play today. But there were pretty much every long pass that happened in the first or in the second and third quarter was a bust that happened on Shaq and Holden's side. And I got to think that's just Holden with a miscommunication, thinking he had help and he didn't, vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard to tell, right? Like it seemed like, whether it was 2 or 3. It seemed like he felt like he had, essentially he passed off his receiver and kept underneath like you would in 2. But you can't do that when the route is being run along the sideline. Even, he's got to know that if that's what they were in. But clearly there was some miscommunication there where Shaq's not going to be able to cover a sideline route in 2. You got to carry that route down the field, but on the same, it looked like the same defensive bust twice, like the same misunderstanding. So that was a bit unfortunate. But he had a nice breakup in the red zone.
And he had a really nice tackle near the end of the game too. That was clutch.
Not bad. I mean, considering how deep down the depth chart they were, I thought he did okay.
And then the other loss was Dejon Allen, who was playing right tackle and was ejected from the game. He was thrown out of the game for what looked to me, and again, we don't have the advantage of TV replay. Maybe you listening at home saw it on TV and saw that there was way more to it. JB, I didn't see much there in this tussle that happened after a play. He got into, what looked sort of like just, come on, okay, break it up, guys, break it up, shoving match with the Mac linebacker from, was it Watson, right?
It seemed harsh for a game that was not in any way chippy. So it wasn't like the referees were trying to whip control back or really kind of rein things in. I mean, look, there was a stomp, there was some pushing. I don't know. To me, I think you're giving penalties and you're giving a warning. I didn't in either side. I didn't think either player deserved to be thrown out of the game. But once they threw the Montreal player out, it was going to be pretty hard to not throw the Toronto player out unless they did nothing.
Yeah, and I would have been a fan of just nothing, offsetting majors on that, and warning to both sidelines, warning both teams, whatever. But it was a huge
I think that would have been the better way to handle it, especially with the tone of that game. I don't know why those referees reacted so strongly to it.
So Shane Richards ends up coming into play right tackle, and that's not a spot he's played a lot. I do like Richards as a tackle, but he's been asked to play guard all last season. That was sort of what he's been built for. And there he is out at right tackle, and I was worried when McLeod took that sack. Do you remember the one where he just got pile drived 6 feet into the ground? It was the hardest hit he took all night, and it came from the end on Richards' side. I thought right away
when Usher hit him.
Yeah, when the Undertaker hit him, it was like there was a reaction in the stadium. Everyone was just like,
yeah.
Whoa.
I mean, if you're a defensive player, you dream of a lick like that on a quarterback. I mean, he hit
him so hard.
He hit him so hard. I mean, we can talk about concussion protocol, but yeah, that was not a great. I don't know who had the shift or whether he was supposed to, the tackle was supposed to come inside and then the guard outside. I don't know what their scheme was, but it was definitely his side.
I think so. Initially, I thought it must be Richards' fault, but in watching the replay that I saw on the scoreboard, it looked like they had called a slide to the left because Richards, he saw the guy. The guy it's not like he came out of nowhere. The end was just to his right, but he didn't pick him up. He instead picked up the D tackle that was just to his left side, and it left Bladek with nobody to block. Bladek basically just stood there. Who do I block? And the end came around and crushed MBT. But yeah, we don't know exactly. Was that supposed to be a kick out from inside? Was Richards given the wrong call? Was the call just sort of messed up from the center in the first place? We don't know. But it didn't. On the replay, it didn't look like it was Richards' fault. But after that play, I thought he actually handled himself very well. And a game that could have gone sideways because of him having to be in there at tackle didn't. None of the stuff that went wrong with the offense later in the game, I put on him.
No, he held his own. It was not an issue of being a turnstile.
So right at the end of the first half, the Argos get a 29-yard field goal from Beattie. And the Alouettes trying to do something with just, I think it was 15 seconds left when they got the ball back, and they're trying to make something happen. And Trevor Harris is now in the game. Maybe we should talk about that in a second. But Trevor Harris throws a pass to nobody in particular, gets picked off by Tavares McFadden, who makes what I thought was a highly intelligent play. So McFadden catches the interception with, I don't know, maybe like 7 or 8 seconds left. And it was the kind that turn into pick sixes. But as he's running it back down the sideline, he realizes that a couple different Montreal Alouettes have an angle on him. And he's looking up at the scoreboard to see the time left. And this was just such a smart play. Instead of trying to force himself to the end zone and running out of time, Ottawa Red Blacks take note, he stepped out of bounds. He waited till he got as far as he could, and then with 1 second left, he stepped out of bounds, knowing now that Beattie could attempt a field goal. He makes it from 38, and that's the difference in the game. Like that Beattie field goal off Tavares McFadden's interception and intelligent sideline play is the difference in this game. So that was a huge moment for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, spoiler alert, that was my play of the game.
That is also my play of the game. So
we should have talked about
that's
this.
a double Double spoiler
We should
alert, but
definitely
let's
talk about things before the podcast.
yeah, we may want to communicate.
Yeah, no, I thought it was, I thought that was such a smart play, and I don't know. I mean, it's tough too. Monday, I'm sure the Argos prepared all week. We did OCDC for Vernon Adams, and then Trevor Harris comes in, and that's always a possibility. But it's hard when you have a quarterback now who's got a different skill set and is going to be looking to run different plays. And I thought they did a pretty good job of adapting to Trevor Harris, and maybe that was the plan all along. That they wanted to throw a wrinkle at the Argos and give them a quarterback that they had not game plan for. Because there wasn't anything I thought Vernon Adams did that made me think he should be pulled. He simply was Vernon Adams. I don't know. Maybe they just suddenly decided that Vernon Adams was not their quarterback, but there certainly was nothing egregious that he did that I
He
thought
didn't have a very long leash.
deserved. No, it seemed predetermined. Like it seemed like we're going to put this guy out here, and now we're going to switch it up, and we're going to try and we're going to try and catch you off guard with a quarterback who's got a different skill set than you prepared for.
Yeah, Adams went 2 for 4 for 14 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. And then they're like, nope, you're out of there. Unless there's an injury that we didn't know about, something like that. But it didn't seem like that's what happened. I asked Wyndham McManus after the game if they had prepared at all for Trevor Harris. And he said they had. They said basically a quarterback, the quality of Trevor Harris, you always have to wonder if something might happen, if he might get in the game. And so they did spend time preparing for him. But Harris had a much better game than I was expecting him to. He finished 18 of 30 for 270. He didn't. It wasn't the best game ever, but it was still better than I thought.
And I'm sure they did. But everybody, there's only. I mean, as any coach will tell you, there's never enough practice time. So you might be like, okay, we're going to run this, we're going to run this, let's run 5 Trevor Harris plays. But you're not. You're not preparing for both quarterbacks equally. There's just not enough time in the day.
Let's talk about some of the rushing that we saw from Andrew Harris in that first half, because he was the story of the first half for the offense for me. They only, they had 11 points, that was disappointing because it probably should have been about 25. But I was really impressed with what I saw from Andrew Harris.
Yeah, I mean, I said to you, well, he ought to be good. He's been sitting on blocks all preseason. But he came out and looked like the real deal. He ran heavy. He ran hard. He ran like no Argos running back in living memory. The team got a jolt from him. He essentially drove the team down the field on that opening drive. He caught the ball out of the backfield. I think he loosened up that run defense so that when they brought in, Adeboye, he felt like he could do a little bit of damage too. I just hope the injury is not a serious one. Obviously, old running backs and injuries are a terrible mix, but he looked fantastic. I thought I didn't think they actually did enough play action off him. They basically went like Harris, take a break.
Yeah, I was waiting for that too. He ended up with 87 yards rushing. He added another 23 yards receiving. I thought the interior line was blocking extremely well for him, and I actually thought Declan Cross did a really nice job sort of hook blocking or 8 blocking the end. And allowing Harris those cutbacks, which we just haven't really seen backs take advantage of. Plays that were designed to run up the middle. Last year, when there were middle runs, which there weren't a lot of, you would see the running back go plowing into the line. And here, when it wasn't there, Harris would bounce it outside. And he had some of his biggest runs on plays like that. So it was great. It was just refreshing to see a back like that in the backfield.
Yeah, I really hope he's good to go because I think the potential to incorporate him into an offense has yet to be explored by the Argos.
Yeah, I'm more worried about him than Coach Dinwiddie seemed to be. We asked about that after the game. He felt tightness in his hamstring, and so they decided to sit him at that point, and that's why Adebayoye was finishing the game, and basically why they sort of stopped running the football once he came out. I just get nervous, even though Coach Dinwiddie didn't seem to be concerned. It was just tightness. It's not like he needed to be carted off or anything like that, but older football player, hamstring injury. You look at Eric Rogers, who's had all sorts of hamstring injuries and leg injuries that have kept him out for 6 weeks at a time. I just hope we're not looking at Andrew Harris going on the 6-game injury list after this game.
Well, I think that, much like Chester last year, you've got to have Harris on a hard run cap. If you want him to be useful in November and December, as much as you want to, you just can't have him carry the ball 18 times, in my opinion. He's not going to be able to carry the ball 20 to 25 times for 18 games. There's not going to be anything left. So that is a challenge I think that's before them, is they're going to have to find a way to keep his engine running and to keep him part of things, but also running back mileage is a real deal, and you want him to be great in November, not July.
Yeah, and I think this might have been. I think this was the game plan, but I don't think this is the game plan for the season. Just to pound Andrew Harris to death. I think this was a reaction to the receivers being thrown about with very little notice. I really think they felt this week. I think they felt like Eric Rogers was going to play, because suddenly you had Brandon Banks playing X, which he's never really played before. I asked him after the game, when's the last time you played X? And he couldn't remember playing X before. And he said he had trouble with it, that he really didn't feel that comfortable out wide. And so that's something that they're going to have to find an answer to for next week. If you've got a guy that's supposed to be one of your best receivers in Banks not feeling comfortable in the spot that he's lining up in, then we've got to move some pieces around. And maybe Devaris Daniels, who didn't have a huge game, maybe he goes back to X. Maybe Ambles can come over and play W. He played W in Calgary last year, and then maybe Speedy B can play that Y or R spot, the spots that he's been repping again and again and again. So I don't really know why they moved everyone around the way they did. And, I think that did impact how much running we saw and the use of Harris.
Yeah, I think they're definitely going to have to. And I'm sure they were excited to use Harris, right? They hadn't really used him. He's a new free agent signing. I'm sure he was keen to get in there and get some real football. I don't know what the magic number is, but, back to the Kawhi days, the regular season is about load management and getting sharp for the games that matter.
In the second half, it was a bit of role reversal, because the Toronto offense had their best drive of the game to start the second half. They looked amazing. So you had that deep pass, a couple of nice runs from Harris, deep pass to Markeith Ambles. I think it was a 35, 37-yard pass down the sideline. And then Bethel Thompson hits Brandon Banks on a slant. Banks does one of his Banksy kind of moves where he ducks under a tackle, fights off a tackle, makes his way into the end zone. That was a beautiful moment. The crowd exploded. And I've got to say, for what was not a huge crowd, 12,400 plus, they were loud tonight. And when Banks scored that touchdown, BMO erupted. And I thought the fans that were there were doing more than their fair share. People that were watching on TV thought it was a much bigger crowd. I've received a bunch of comments from that.
No,
people saying,
so did I. My guess was 15. I was there. I thought it was 15,000. It's Thursday night sucks. It would have been nice if it had been on a Friday night. That probably.
Well, why are we opening on a Thursday? Why is it opening night on a Thursday in a market that struggles to draw people? What's the CFL doing putting a Toronto Argonauts opener on a Thursday night? It's just, to me, it doesn't make any sense.
No, I'm sure Tannenbaum and MLSE threw their phone across the room while debating with somebody standing in a cow pasture about the schedule. I wrote an article 3 years ago about improving, fan interaction. And I mean, you have to have a football night. Like, you can't have like football's on 5 separate nights. You're like, well, how are you supposed to develop a routine with fans when they've got to do a better job. I mean, this is all an offshoot, but the league has to do a better job of having certain teams play at the same time every week, so you can build a schedule around it. So it's something that you want to do. It's not like this week the Argos play at 11:30 on Wednesday, and you're like, what? Who? How and then they play Sunday at 3, and then the next week is Thursday at 9, and you're like, okay, sure. That's not the way to build a routine. A family likes to do it. Oh, this is what we do on this day. So that was really disappointing that there wasn't a Friday kickoff game. But like you say, the crowd was great. It was loud. It was a perfect day. No thunderstorm. It's a shame that there weren't another 10,000 people there, because I think they would have really enjoyed it much more than, say, watching the Blue Jays lose to the worst team in baseball this
Yes,
afternoon.
probably so. I bet. So the defense kind of flipped in the second half as well. So we saw that nice drive from the Toronto offense. The defense was on the field for 4 different drives in the second half, and they didn't force a single punt. Every one of those drives went on and on and on. You had a 10-play drive followed by an 8-play drive. What's happening in the second half?
Heat. It was hot.
Yeah.
And the air was hot. And this was the first game. And I'm not so sure that the defense necessarily had their legs under them for a full... I mean, a lot of those guys hadn't played a full game yet, right? Like a lot of the starters.
Yeah.
I think football shape caught up to them in the second half, and there were some really bad missed tackles, and definitely some grabbing of the knees to get your breath after plays. I thought they gutted it out, but for sure, I thought that the defense looked gassed in that second half, especially after being so good in the first half. So that it was nice that they were able to, to hold it. But for like their pass rush got a little sloppy. They didn't have lane discipline. They would have a nice rush, but then the quarterback was able to escape for 10 yards a couple of times. I was not crazy about their zone defense, and how like that zone never seemed to turn into man. It just stayed in zone. Regardless of where people ran. So, I think that'll improve as the season goes on. Guys get their football legs under them. I think, and the offense stays on. But there wasn't a huge disparity. I don't blame the offense there. It wasn't like Montreal had the ball for 45 minutes. I think that's just guys getting in shape.
I asked about fatigue. Wynton McManus is the guy I asked, I think, and he didn't want to acknowledge that was a thing. He said it was adjustments that were the issue, Montreal's second half adjustments that sort of caught them. But I think when he looks at the game film and he sees the missed tackles and the guys just breathing heavy, like you said, there may have been some adjustments they struggled with too. But there's no question, this was a tired defense by the end of the game.
Yeah, I mean, it was you could see it. Because they were there and they just couldn't make the tackle on a number of plays.
Boris Beatty didn't miss field goals last year, and in this one, he missed his last 2. Now, one of them's from 45. That's a long field goal, but he missed a short field goal too, and that is not very Beatty-like. And so, I guess the question is, I think 26 was the other one he missed. Is this a reason for concern at this point, to have a kicker that really didn't miss last year suddenly missing?
No, I don't think so. I didn't get a great look at the kick he missed. I was looking for the replay. It sounded terrible. It sounded like a really bad miss hit. So I'd like to take a look at it, but I don't think so. I think he hit some, he missed some. Last year was a season for the ages. I don't think you can expect him to come out and repeat a season like that. I think you're looking at a little regression, but a little regression's fine. He's still he's still not Swayze. I mean, think back to the times we've had. I'm fully behind Boris Beatty.
Yeah, no, I am too. I wonder if having a new holder has come into play, or if that may not be anything at all. But I think when you start missing, you start to ask questions. Maybe he's wondering, is it having Haggerty holding for me instead of Bethel Thompson? Do you think we see Bethel Thompson back out there holding next week?
I hope not.
I hope not too.
I don't think so. I mean, I know kickers can be a little superstitious about that stuff, but I would say give it some time. Let's if we get to the third game and he's only kicking 50%, we might be worried, but I think it'll be fine.
At the very end of the game, Montreal has a mammoth drive. They score a touchdown. The defense was just gassed at that stage. They go for two. They don't get it. Toronto's now up 2018 with it was 2018 with just a few minutes remaining, and they give the ball back to Toronto, and this is where you want to see Toronto put together a drive. It's a 2-point game. You've got a couple of minutes left. We're under the 3-minute warning. You've got to put something together here, and they can't. They end up punting the ball back to Montreal. Montreal goes all the way down the field, and it looked over. With 18 seconds left to go, Montreal calls a timeout on 3rd and 7. They're on the 7-yard line. No, they're on the 17-yard line, I think. And no, it's the 13-yard line. There we go. Third time's a charm. They're on the 13-yard line. They call a timeout. And I was thinking at that moment, now I still thought this field goal would go through, but I don't call a timeout there. I hate coaches calling a timeout when their own kicker is out there. So they send out the field goal unit. His field goal kicker is lining up to kick a field goal. They wait. They let the clock run right down to 1, and then Kari Jones calls a timeout. To me, that's icing your own kicker. If you're going to call a timeout there, then don't send him out.
Right.
Keep the offense out there, wait for the clock to go down.
Terrible.
Now call your timeout and then send him out. That's brutal.
No, I would kill a coach for that, like in terms of my report card. I mean, you just don't do that. You just can't send him out there. Like, what are you doing? Just have your offense stay on the field and then get down to 1 second and call timeout and bring the field goal kicker out. Like, why on earth would you bring your field goal kicker out and not use him and then freeze him? I think he's got to wear that. There's no two ways about it. That was some dumb football.
And he misses the 21-yard field goal left to get the rouge, and the score ends up 20-19. It reminded me of so many different things. Remember the BC game last year that should have been a Toronto loss, and their kicker just completely fell to pieces at the end. And what about the win over Hamilton last year, 16-15, I think it was, where the convert went off the upright after Arbuckle almost threw the game away, and Toronto wins on that one. We actually asked Speedy Banks about that after the game, if he remembered that one. He remembered it very well. So he said it was nice to be on the other side of that.
The problem for Montreal. Montreal's 0-2 now.
Yeah,
and their owner apparently is going to fire them all because they were unable to do both. So that's a problem for Montreal. Now they haven't played a home game yet, but they're digging themselves a bit of a hole.
Yeah, they're in trouble. And if you look at the East standings right now, like Toronto was in first place before this game because all three East teams lost last week. They've won now. Montreal's 0-2. There's a lot of pressure this week on the other East teams. Hamilton's facing a tremendous amount of pressure playing Calgary now because you don't want to be 0-2 and Toronto's already running away with it, and they've only played one game, a game that they probably shouldn't have won at the end there. So yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure, and Ottawa's playing Winnipeg again. So you could find the situation come Monday morning that you've still got a winless East except for Toronto. That wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility at all. JB, let's go through our plays of the game and our player of the game. So we may have already blown our play of the game. So it's got to be that McFadden pick and step out of bounds. That's what you're sticking with?
Well, actually, just as an aside, do you know who Montreal's third and fourth games are against?
No, I haven't looked at their schedule.
Saskatchewan.
Both,
back to back.
All right, well, see you, Montreal.
Yeah, exactly. Au revoir.
All right.
Yeah, we did ruin the. I thought There wasn't. I mean, the bank slant play could easily be. I was happy to see that in the second half. I thought that there should have been way more of that in the first half mixed in. I think that, those sort of inside the hash throws are what he excels at, um, in terms of Macbeth. And, Banks, that's what you want. You want Banks catching that ball on the run in space. That is what he does. You don't want him catching balls out on the boundary like Rogers, like where he's got nowhere to go. It's not his skill set. So, um, I think it could be the Banks catch. The Harris play everybody loved where he jumped over the tackle, but the game turned on that interception and field goal. It felt like it. It felt like the Argos were going to win that game after that. Just terrible pick by Harris. Just terrible. Like just throwing to no one. You love to see it.
I did love to see it, but I just thought the stepping out of bounds part for me is what clinched it as
smart.
such a beautiful
and then
play.
BD came in, and then he's ice, right? Perfect. Just crushed it.
Yeah, and maybe he needs, the pressure or the situation. I don't know what it is.
No, it was exactly how good teams win football games, because stupid teams make mistakes.
Players of the game, JB, who are you going to go with for your offensive player of the game?
I think the offensive player of the game has to be Harris. He was absolutely electric when he came on the field. He looked like no other Argo I can remember. He was powerful. He was ready. The crowd loved it. The team loved it. He went out there, was getting 4 or 5 yards a carry, catching the ball out of the backfield. He obviously wanted to be fed. He looked fantastic. He looked amazing.
I would typically go with Harris as well, but just to be different, I'm going to say Shane Richards, just for coming in that scenario. He played most of the game. Remember, this was early in the second quarter when he had to come in and play the rest of the football game. He hasn't been getting reps at tackle, and to step in there and largely run a problem-free and, in fact, effective game at tackle, I thought was great. So that could have gone so poorly, and instead he played really well. And you got to give him credit for that. So I'll say Shane Richards, although I think Andrew Harris is probably makes a bit more sense.
I'm going to give a shout out too to Curly Gittens Jr. He was my guy last year a bunch of times. I just can't get enough of that dude. He's just a professional wide receiver. He just goes out there. He does the job. He catches the ball. Not a lot of fancy plays, not a lot of huge plays, but absolutely a rock for the Argos. And he's going to break one of those Ricky Collin Memorial screenplays. He looked. I thought he looked fantastic last year, and he right back to work.
He had 6 catches on 8 targets for 66 yards, and there could have been another one, that beautiful catch he made late in the game where it looked like he may have tapped his toe down, but then you could see on the replay that his toe came down just out of bounds. But that was a stunning effort on his part. Yeah, he's awesome. How nice is it to have a Canadian receiver like that playing at that level?
Doesn't get the hype either, really, because he's not scoring 3 touchdowns a game, but man, he's great.
Where are you going for defensive player of the game?
It was nice. Look, there were a bunch of guys that played really well. Like we talked about, I thought Ray looked like he was shot out of a cannon, and more than just pass rush, the backside chase down. Mwamba looked awesome with his, apparently, I don't know if the Argos are going to go with his guitar solo after they announce his plays. I'd be down with that if that's something they're trying out. You've got a yes vote from this fan for the electric guitar sound effect for Mwamba. But I'm going to have to go with Wynton McManus, the anti-judge. He came in and just balled out. He crushed some poor Alouette in the red zone. He had a sack. He was all over the field. I thought he was... not a revelation, because I think we both felt that he was going to be a good player. Like, great addition. I mean, if he, plug him into that defense, I thought the linebacker crew really, really looked sharp.
And just like Enoch Mwamba did last year, Wynton McManus brought his baby to the press conference, which is a great strategy to soften the questions from the reporters. Because, what are you going to say when a player is standing there with their baby? Ultimately, the questions...
Well, the baby deserved it because Dad balled out.
Oh yeah, no, he played a great game. So I'm going to give my defensive player of the game to Shane Ray. I was waiting for this. I've been waiting for this for a year, and it was a great game. And part of me, I think, is slightly worried that we may not see him for a bit. I hope that's not the case. I hope he's just fine. Maybe it's just like a jammed finger or something like that. But he looked excellent, especially in that first half.
And I love the pursuit. Like not just running the hoop and then going 6 yards deep on the quarterback and then catching your breath, which occasionally pass rush specialists do. He tracked guys down like a linebacker. It was great to see.
Well, that will just about do it for us on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. Check out JB's report card tomorrow on xsandargos.com, and we'll have all sorts of stuff coming to you this week. JB, if you think this week was a late one, do you know who the Argos play next week?
I do.
I will be out in BC, and it will just be about 10:30 for me. But JB, it is going to be the middle of the night when we record our next post-game reaction podcast.
Let me just say this to the Argos, is you better play well, or I am going to be acetylene torching. That's all I can say is the margin of error for me will be very thin at 2 a.m.
For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.